This video is brought to you by over 50,000 people now subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much for all your support, and much like SAO, this journey will continue into the future too. Alice dealing with the troubles of being a public interest due to her situation, whereas Akiko Kayaba is working towards his goal with the help of the Star King, allowing Kirito and Co access back into Underworld as the inter-intelligence war approaches. Welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk, your best source of Sword Art Online information, and this is Alicization Explained featuring War of Underworld Finale, Episode 23, New World. Short overview, this week we covered the final 55 pages of the Volume 18 Alicization lasting, obviously way above the safe adaptation mark of 40 pages, so it shouldn't surprise you when I'm gonna say scenes were cut. In fact, I'm pretty sure you felt the higher pace of the episode yourself when watching, but what should surprise you is the fact that this episode remained an incredibly solid adaptation despite all that what was cut, along with the frantic pacing. For once, the trimming work was on point, and I felt like the faster pacing that many people would probably call quote-unquote rushed really benefited this episode. It was on purpose that I said faster pacing instead of rushed, as I would not call this episode rushed at all. That's a word I would use for scenes the anime would try to whiz past to reach other more exciting things. This was simply fast without compromising the story. They weren't rushing, they were condensing, and condensing brilliantly at that, and you'll see what I mean once we start with the explained. But if you're new to my series, what I do here is essentially provide you all the vital information on characters, events, action, lore from the source material, light novels, things that the anime did not convey properly or just did not have the time to, so you can still see the full picture. If you want to jump to specific events, timestamps will be in the description along with the Amazon and Book2Post affiliate links, so you can grab the light novels for yourselves. With Alicization anime complete, you can jump onto the Alicization side story volumes 19 and 20 Moon Cradle right now, with the beginning of the next main arc, Sword Art Online volume 21 Unital Ring 1, getting released in January 2021 by Yam Press, so do grab your copies down below. And considering Progressive Anime has just been announced, you may actually want to give those a try too. Remember, light novels are the source material, not the manga. With that, let's cast away the sly foxes spreading misinformation and get on with Alicization Explained. I have to say I loved the animation this week. It was actually fluid and very expressive, especially moments of surprise and facial animations. I wish we had seen this kind of expressive animation more in the series, and throughout these kinds of scenes, I will not mention every single nook and cranny that was cut. As I said, the pacing was fast and thus a lot of trimming had to be done, so I'll only go into notable things that were glossed over or completely cut. But worry not, I still got a lot of things to talk about this week, but it's the good kind of way. As I always say, if I had to just fill in the blanks rather than recite entire chapters that were cut, the anime did a good job. And thus, we are starting with how Alice actually managed to ship herself to Kirito and even putting the delivery fees on Kirito's wallet no less. And no, there was nothing mentioned regarding her being naked in the books. But her valiant escape was quite simple to achieve actually, per Alice's words. She simply found some pay on delivery forms, found a box, made sure she showed on cameras as if she was running away on foot, but then fitted the box properly outside of the view of those cameras, put tape on one side of the cover from the outside just for show, hoping it would stick a little, got in, taped it from the inside properly to make sure it would not open. Once the box was at the entrance of the premises, she used her onboard Wi-Fi, or rather her quite extensive wireless connection capabilities that we don't know fully, to request a package pickup. Since the request had come from inside the premises and since the package was at the entrance already, the postman did not have any issues with the security and simply picked it up, and seeing that the tape was sloppily applied, he fixed it himself and put it onto the truck. When she finally got out of the box, however, at Kirito's home, she was quite impressed by the wooden house. It was so amazing that she wondered how the life of the house could last so long and from what wood it was made. It's a little thing, yeah, I know, but it showcases her transition from the game mechanics, from the game world, into how the real world works bit by bit, in my opinion. It's quite the important scene despite being such a small thing. This was also followed by her requesting to recover her life, which was basically, can I plug myself into the socket please? You probably recognize plenty of similar word choices to highlight her transition in the upcoming dialogues too. All the while, however, Kirito was wondering if he should serve the girl any tea or not before finally realizing Alice cannot drink anything anyways. But of course, the pace that Alice was getting used to the technology made Kirito wonder about a lot of things as to what would happen when she actually was proficient enough. Sure, Yui was capable of a lot of other things too, but at the end of the day, Yui was technically just a program. Perhaps a better comparison would have been Kayaba's consciousness, but Kirito didn't think too much about it any further. The dialogue between Kirito and Alice that the anime adapted beautifully in my opinion is quite important. For people looking at every sentence at face value, not understanding what love is, just looking for a mention of quote-unquote love in a desperate attempt to validate their headcanonship, it probably was quite boring, primarily because it had none of that love, but also because if they try thinking about what's being said ever so slightly, it's yet another instance that shatters their headcanon of Kiri-Alice pairing. The entire dialogue is once again about how Alice feels, this time with her for the first time not hiding her feelings from someone rather than going through her honest inner monologues with herself. She took care of this vegetable for 6 months, just in search of the truth, the meaning of life, and the moment the vegetable finally woke up, he stayed behind potentially to never ever wake up again, leaving her with no answers at all yet again. That's why she was angry. Furthermore, being told to simply leave and then becoming a PR stunt for almost a month now, it's only natural that the course of life she perceived made her feel more like a tool rather than a human being. It sure didn't help that the entire world of journalists was observing her like an experiment. She, of course, was, but that didn't change the fact that she was inherently human and had the need to be treated as such. And Kirito's answer is completely on point. She is hope. For the ideals that Kirito had since the fairy dance arc, it was the reason why he built the probe for Yui back then, why he was never able to not be interested in VR, why he took the job offer of Rath to see the future of Full Dive, and even why Star King, after 200 years, declared that he would fight for Underworld because he considered Underworld to be part of that hope. The hope that one day real and virtual would become one. But neither Kayaba nor Star King do not know what the future will bring, and most certainly not Kirito himself. All he knows is that Alice will play a big part of moving towards that future. It's a short but lovely conversation that goes full circle back to the roots of the series once again. Just a minor thing, when Rinko and Kirito hung up, Kirito also mentioned Alice needed to turn her GPS tracker back on just in case, which she had turned off before her escape, just to give you a little bit more of an idea as to what's inside her infrastructure there in the body. The dojo scene is almost perfectly adapted if you ask me, bar the inner monologues and one change, that is the shinai in their hands getting broken rather than them not being able to hold them properly enough and letting them escape their grasp, because one is a lifelike robot that doesn't have the infrastructure to actually go into a sword fight, and the other is a gamer who just came out of a 1-month coma after being declared brain dead. Yeah, that was part of Kirito's inner monologues too. At first, he wasn't sure if Alice would be able to maintain a strong enough grip or even have the infrastructure to go into a fast-paced sword combat situation. In fact, the anime even adapted her actuators whirring as she lunged, which was neat, but it only took a couple seconds for Kirito to realize that she was, even if not designed for sword combat, she was a huge chunk of metal, whereas he was just woken up from his coma and was still recovering, so even at the best case scenario, he should probably be careful against a large chunk of metal lunging at him. She took the stance of Avalanche, or the Mountain Splitting Wave as it was called in Underworld, and Kirito responded with Ring Vortex or Cyclone depending on the translation you're following, known as Whirling Current from Sarlut style. And of course, the moment their swords locked, both of them could not maintain the grip on the handle rather than the shinai breaking, and the training sword simply flew off their hands, and Kirito learned once again not to underestimate large chunks of metal when her head smashed into his. And that's why you see a reddish portion on Kirito's forehead there. Kiri Dad scene is adapted perfectly, so glossing over that one, But the moment it ended, Kirito was under the assumption that this was probably the end of all the shenanigans he had endured over the years. Now he had to study, go to college, get a work at Rath, as he plotted out earlier during dinner. So he bid his farewells to a passing age, prepared to go back to an ordinary life, and went to bed. Only to be woken up by Alice in the middle of the night, who had received an email that she printed using her Wi-Fi connection. Of course, a couple changes do exist in this scene. For starters, Ogma now exists, and thus Yui no longer needs to use the probe from the light novels. Secondly, they sure are acting like Alice thus cannot see Yui, which would be both understandable and not understandable because she can just connect into the local network. It's not like Yui was invisible to Klein and Sugua when Asuna was contacting her back in Human Realm episode 5. And on top of that, unlike the probe that used a speaker that allowed Alice to hear Yui, the voice is once again transmitted through Ogma's connection to the brain directly, once again implying Alice is indeed connected to be able to hear her. So why was she acting like she could not see her? Beats me. It seemed like they wanted to have it both ways and keep it ambiguous. As for more changes, the initial assumption was that maybe Quinella was still alive somehow because the message was way too explicit about certain locations in the Underworld, which were different in the novels, different locations, not different contexts, just locations were changed, but I guess they had to change it, it would have been even harder to secure a specific IP address. They probably found one to secure for their neat little Easter egg and then adjusted the message, the locations within the message to match the specific floors they needed for that IP address. But going back to the topic at hand, they eventually decided it could not have been Quinella, who would presumably write down my world rather than yon world, and of course Kirito knew it could not have been Kayaba, as Kayaba did not know the inside of the central cathedral. What Kirito did not know, however, there was now someone out there who was working with Kayaba who knew the exact specifications of the central cathedral. So if you do want to know more about Star King, I strongly recommend checking the video I made with SAO Wikia on him. Unlike what some foxes may say, we have no reason to believe he is evil Kirito. That's a terribly stupid thing to say. As they arrived at the Roppongi office, a scene with Alice going into yet another pissing contest with Asuna was cut, just like many previous instances in the series, and just like back then, this is one of those better cuts. The anime really tried painting Alice in a much more likable manner throughout the series, rather than the annoying toaster that she was in the novels. She certainly would not have as many fans as she has now if the anime adapted all the scenes she decided to be a bitch for the sole reason of being a bitch. And don't go telling me to not say things like that when she herself explicitly states in her own inner monologues that she does what she does solely because she is jealous of Asuna's beauty as well as her commanding presence in scenes. I ain't the fox, I actually know how to read books and tell you things as they really are rather than resorting to lying to your face. When Asuna says it probably didn't change much, just even in just 2 years as the Human Empire delegates, decades before they were given the title of Star King and Star Queen, they already had changed so much in the world. Anyways, with both Kirito and Asuna in an STL and Alice connected with a cable thanks to having an actual light cube in her head directly compatible with the system, they dive back in and we get to the Underworld scene. There's just too much to be said about this scene specifically, and if you're curious about how this ties into the future of the series, what the inter-intelligence war may be, what that Kirito will return refers to, and no, it does not refer to SAO Progressive, I have an entirely separate video where I focus on all those questions and answers, including spoiler content, so that this video here will remain spoiler free. So if you want to have all the information we have at the moment, after watching this video, check out that one. But okay, starting with the dive. The general rule of thumb is that when you log in, you appear at the last place you logged out from, and that still does work perfectly the same way in Underworld as far as we know from some other instances. However, this scene is an exception and is assumed to be the case because of Kayaba's outside connection that changed their default location for the first dive, hence why all three appeared in the same space rather than Alice at the World's End altar and Kirito and Asuna wherever they went for hiding in their final 30 years in Underworld. And of course, the two eggs Alice is holding, they are Amayori and Takiguri obviously. I wouldn't have mentioned it, but I just have seen way too many questions from people not paying the bare minimum attention on the internet. How they are managing to survive here out in space? Well, the anime just tried to cheap out by having this aura effect around them which gives you no explanations whatsoever, but when they first logged in, all three were basically feeling freezing cold and Kirito realized their life value had to be rapidly dropping, so he basically created a barrier made from light elements via incarnation to shield them from the cold of the space. And that light barrier is also why you see Kirito's arrival as a star, as Stika is aiming at the Abyssal horror. As the inner monologues are cut, of course, I'll provide some more context to this scene. During the 200 years, the humanity eventually set out to space, which was the event that led to Kirito and Asuna being given the title of Star King and Star Queen. This was way after their time as Human Empire delegates, which was what they were in Moon Cradle, unlike what you may hear from Foxen. However, once humanity set out to stars, at a certain point, they encountered the mythical beast, Abyssal Horror. Star King and Star Queen both fought valiantly but were not able to beat it. The moment the beast was about to die, it would simply flee in a dark smoke-like shape and survive. However, over time, through observation, humanity figured out that the Abyssal Horror had a fixed orbit, so it only appeared at specific times. As they were not able to vanquish it, they simply decided to plan their travels around its existence to never be attacked instead. But this time, luckily, Kirito and Asuna were not alone. Dwindling the health of the beast was not a big problem for the duo, they had done it before, but incinerating its existence was. With Alice's flowers, however, chasing every single remnant of the beast, the Abyssal Horror was defeated for good. But with that, from here on out, I'll just have individual clarifications, as this Underworld dive is actually titled Prologue 3 in the Alicization Light Novels and is a prologue tease for the next main arc, Unital Ring. To keep this video spoiler free, I will only mention things that are not explicit spoilers from Sword Art Online. For those Unital Ring and Inter-Intelligence War information, you need to check out my Ending Explained special. For starters, Kirito and Asuna were in the process of creating fighter jets as early as 1.5 years after the end of War of Underworld. Of course, that's not a particularly hard task when you do not need to worry about physics and you have this thing called sacred arts and various other game mechanics at your disposal paving the way for you. So it should surprise absolutely none of you that after 200 years, the Underworld is pretty damn advanced. However, considering the rate of advancement and technology, speaking from a creativity/idea standpoint of course, came from two real worlders rather than actual inventors, it also shouldn't surprise you that the tech looks very much traditional and similar to ours rather than extremely futuristic stuff. The Space Fighter is basically a dragon-shaped F-16 that uses Sacred Arts spatial resources for thrust and weapons, rather than something from a SpaceX Future Goals demo reel. Secondly, Stika Strinan and Lorene Arabelle, as you can guess from their surnames, are the descendants of Teases and Ronnie respectively. They both married, had kids and grandkids and so on. If you're gonna ask about why Kirito has the blue rose sword because you have some information about what happens at the end of Moon Cradle, here's a vague reminder that he probably just took the sword back after that person passed away. That shouldn't spoil anyone to anything's context as long as you don't know what happens. And the most important thing in this entire scene, in my opinion, the one massive thing that Foxen somehow fucked up, surprising nobody in his sheer incompetence, as it was explicitly described in the novels as two vertical swords, white and black, blue roses and golden osmanthus flowers entwined around them, the insignia of the Star King, a figure now turning into legend. Now, I don't know if foxes are colorblind, but please do let me know if they see the color blue as completely white. The insignia of the Star King was first described in Sword Art Online Volume 18, Alicization, lasting in this very scene, and first visualized in Accel World Volume 20 illustrations. It showcases the trademark swords of Kirito the Star King and Asuna the Star Queen, the Night Sky Sword and the Radiant Light respectively, surrounded by Yu-Gi-Oh's Blue Roses and Alice's Osmanthus flowers. As for why Stika and Laura feel like they know them, well, it's not like it's the first time you have seen ancestral bonds in play in the series. Heck, the reason why some nobles like Volo Levantain were so powerful is because their ancestral bonds were helping them. It's really no different here. The final scene is a lovely final illustration by Abek drawn in anime style. The poem is as clear as it needs to be. The complete story of Alicization has been told. But Kirito and others will return to fight in the Interintelligence War. Kayabot in the bottom of the ocean and the Star King Light Cube in Higa's room is just a reference for the scene that they cut out last week, so do check out episode 22 explained for that. As for the Kirito will return, it is not a progressive tease at all as some people claim it to be. We already had that announcement. They don't realize it will take 70 years at best for progressive to reach this specific attire of Kirito. That one tease is a tease for Unital Ring. I did plenty of videos why War of Underworld is not the end of the series, so you can check any one of those for what's next. And again, my ending explained video, as well as videos I have done with the Wikia like Meet Star King, Introduction to Moon Cradle and Introduction to Unital Ring, will also provide you all the information you need for now. But that is pretty much it. The 10 volumes long Alicization saga has come to a full close, with the final prologue leading us into Unital Ring. In the upcoming days, I will have videos about Sword Art Online Progressive, so you won't have to listen to the lies and misinformation Fox and spouts. I'll also cover some side stories in Story of the Past series, like I did with Hopeful Chant and Cordial Chords. That is all the teasers for the future I can provide you this week. If you have questions that you feel like were not answered in the explained episodes, do ask them below in the comment section with hashtag AskGamerturk for the final weekly Alicization Q&A. If your question is regarding the future, please add a spoiler warning and give it a couple blank lines to push the spoilers away. And no, I will not answer spoiler questions for the sake of spoilers, like is Graphite Egg Star King? If you're that curious for spoilers, just read the books. Amazon and Book Depository links are in the description. And joke's on you, that question doesn't even have an answer in the books yet, but I can talk more than enough as to why he's most probably not Star King. And well, this one's gonna be the final weekly Alicization Q&A. I will keep doing plenty of Q&A videos in the future. But if you made it this far, comment Virtual Research Society to let me know. I wonder what the meaning of that is. Wink wink, just watch my Unital Ring related videos if you're curious. If you enjoyed this week's Explained, please do leave a like, and if you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more in-depth coverage of SAO and all the news. Alicization anime has come to a close, but I will have a lot of other lovely SAO stories for you to experience in the near future, like the evening of Kirito's first day on Aincrad, where he was almost killed by another beta tester, so look forward to the first day. Of course, follow me on Facebook and Twitter for the fastest news possible. A massive thanks for 50,000 subscribers. To celebrate, the 50k subscriber special merch is now live, as usual, drawn by the amazing Jen K. A huge thanks to all my patrons and channel members as always, and until next time, stay cool.